Welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be talking about a perennial cane fruit, the blackberry. It can be quite expensive at the grocery store too, particularly when it's fresh. So let's explore this plant and see if it might be a good fit for your garden. So again, like I said, this is a perennial cane fruit. The rootstock is perennial, but the above ground parts are biennial. That is to say, when a new cane on the plant starts to grow from the bottom and it sprouts up and it grows up into this big tall plant, that is its first year of growth. It will not flower or bear fruit that first year. All it's doing is leafing out, growing tall, collecting what it can from photosynthesis and storing it up for the next year when it will then send out flowers and begin to bear fruit. Now concurrently, while these stalks are growing nice, big and tall, it also has, these are the stalks from last year. Granted, they're not very large because I just transplanted them in the garden last season, but these were what grew last year, and these are what are now flowering and will hopefully begin to soon bear fruit. So like I said, it does it concurrently. It grows the vegetative growth in the canes for next season, but also at the same time the canes from the season before are beginning to flower and to produce fruit. And that happens each year. These plants are also self-fertile, meaning that you don't need multiple plants for reliable pollination. This is a thornless variety of blackberry that I got from a neighbor. So with it being a thornless variety, it can also make it a little bit more prone to predation from deer and rabbits because they're not as detracted from it as they would be from thorned varieties. Thornless varieties can make it a little easier for us, but it can also make it easier for other herbivorous creatures. Now this garden that I have is fenced in. So far I haven't seen any real browse of these blackberry plants yet, so hopefully we can keep it that way. So I have a supporting fence here to act as kind of a trellis. These are for the canes for like next year, so they don't get bent over and fall into the pathway or anything like that. Sometimes I'll weave them through the linkings on the fence, or if they're growing a little farther out from the fence, all I need to do is just take a piece of rope or string or twine and just kind of tie it from one end of the fence and secure it over here so it doesn't bend over too far. That way the fence is still able to support the plants that may be a little bit further away from it. So this plant is also very easy to propagate, and it propagates readily. Similar to like raspberries or wineberries, the growing tips, if they do bend over and they hit the ground, they will begin to root at the tip and they will begin forming a new plant. This can eventually be cut off from the main plant, dug up, and transplanted to where you might want it in the garden. So I think this just sends up like runners up through the soil, and it's sprouting up in different areas as well. And so those can just be dug up and be transplanted in the garden if you want to expand your blackberry patch. I would like to expand the blackberry patch. I'll probably be doing some more of that this fall, which also kind of dovetails into when you want to transplant these blackberry plants. You can transplant them in the spring. They may not bear much fruit that first year, or if you've got them in the first year, they won't bear any fruit. However, they will be able to have a good chance to establish themselves for the next year. You can also plant them in the fall. However, over winter, they're going to be dormant. They're not going to have that chance to reestablish themselves and secure their root systems in place so that they can have strong growth that next spring. You know, instead they're going to be stunted. Don't expect much or any fruit that year, because then they'll take that entire season from spring, from that spring to the next fall, to reestablish themselves, and then the next year after that they should come back strong. I've transplanted them both in the springtime and in the fall. They all have a very good survival rate. So it's just that if you transplant them in the fall, the productivity may be stunted for an entire year. It's not too picky about soil nutrients or mineral content in the soil. Like I said, this soil is really not that great, and these plants, with all the flowers on it, it looks like it's quite productive. And also the canes that are coming up are also really nice, big, thick, and lush. and I didn't really put down anything. You can put down a little bit of compost, you can mulch it. Companion plants might be a good idea too. Rue can be a beneficial plant for blackberry plants. Sage can also be too. However, rue and sage are commonly seen to not be good companion plants together. You know, so maybe if you do companion planting, plant some rue with your blackberries and then plant sage with some other blackberries or something like that. I don't know, and I haven't tried it. Maybe it really doesn't matter, but it's something I've kept in mind and something I'd like to gauge to see what's going on with that. So the leaves can be used to make tea, but the berries, the blackberries, they're of course really rich in antioxidants, and they can be eaten raw or cooked. You can preserve them to make jams, jellies, and whatever else. You can probably freeze them too. You might also be able to take the berries and you might be able to mash them up and make like a fruit leather out of them as well. I've done it with raspberries in the past and it turns out really delicious. So it can be a really enjoyable plant to grow. Here in Zone 6A, it seems to be doing quite well. It likes full sun. When you transplant them, make sure you give them some good water. And these are plants that do love to grow. They love to spread too, so be mindful of that. If you have an area of a garden where you can devote to predominantly or just blackberries, at least until you get used to their personality, and then you'll learn how else you can incorporate these plants into your garden and how they will or will not work with other plants. But yeah, it's definitely a great plant to grow, and hopefully it'll save quite a bit of money where we no longer have to rely on the supermarket to supply us with blackberries, when for many of us we can grow them in our own backyards. Alright, so here is a blackberry plant that I transplanted back in the fall. As you can see, it's very young. It's sending up its cane for next year's fruit production, but of course this cane does not look as nearly as large as some of the other canes, like this one, which was planted back in the spring, last spring. And it's had much more time to grow. And so the larger cane had that whole last season to establish itself, whereas this cane is just getting its foot in the ground, so to speak, to send up that cane. So next year I should still be able to get some fruit out of it, but I just wanted to show this to illustrate the size difference and the growth difference between when you transplant in the spring versus when you transplant later on in that fall. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video on blackberries. Do some research on it, see if it's a good plant for your garden. And keep your eyes open, look around. I'm sure there are probably a lot of gardeners out there who do grow blackberries, even probably the thorn-less variety, who are probably looking to get rid of some of their extra blackberry plants that may be sprouting up in the garden. Maybe they have some extras that they might be willing to share with you. Other than that, you'll probably be able to find them at nurseries or online or something like that. But yeah, a fantastic plant to grow, very delicious addition to the garden. So thank you for taking the time to check out this video. Hopefully I'll be able to see you in a future video. Alright, take care.